teachers, and I have many of my union brothers and sisters here with me today, so please stand. All DFT members, stand up. Past and present. These are some of the hardest working men and women who sacrifice for children each and every day, doing more with less than anyone else. Outstanding job. So I want to welcome you all to Marcus Garvey Academy. I want to thank the principal, Mr. Rozier, and his assistant principal for allowing us to utilize the space. I want to thank all of my brothers and sisters around the state of Michigan from AFT. Give yourselves a hand. This is an important conversation, and it's high time that we've got elected folks who want to come and talk to us about investment and talk to us about teacher salaries and how we can make the job that we do better for us and better for our students. So again, welcome to Detroit Public Schools. Welcome to Marcus Garvey Academy. And with that, I will turn it over to President of the American Federation of Teachers Michigan, David Hecker.
Thank you, Terrence. Thanks everybody for coming out. It's great to have all of you here. It's great to have our great national president, Randy Weingarten, with us. And momentarily, we will have Senator Harris. We've had a great day with Senator Harris. We were at the Academy of the Americas, let's hear it, where Senator Harris read to a class and talked to teachers. We then went to Dearborn, to Miller Elementary, where Senator Harris read to every fourth grader in the media center. And you know, the one thing I commented on when it was over is when I was in fourth grade, I never would have had the guts to ask a question of a United States Senator, let alone a United States Senator running for President of the United States. It was impressive. We always take advantage of a crowd. And you see the AFT signs, Fund Our Future. With all of you, we're doing an incredible amount of work in Michigan to address as Terrence said, the disinvestment in public education. There's a flyer on June 18th and June 25th. We're having rallies in Lansing with the Michigan Education Association to fight for better funding for pre-K 16 education. We also, leading up to that, have a campaign of postcards. So these postcards are on the tables along with an instruction page for the postcards. What we want you to do, where it says Fund Our Future, we want you to write a note to your state representative or your state senator, or take 2 cards and write them to both. Okay, just say why we need more funding for education. You know, if you have a sentence in there about your personal experience, how old your textbooks are, or the condition of the building, or how long it's been since you had a decent raise, any issue you want to talk about. On this side, put down the name of your senator or your rep, and then leave the cards with us. Leave the cards at one of the 2 tables when you came in the back. Because what we're going to do with the Michigan Education Association is over the next month and a half, we're going to collect all these cards, collect more cards on June 18th. Then when we're back in the Capitol and June 18th, Randy Weingarten will be with us. Thank you, Randy. And then on June 25th, we're going to deliver these cards to the legislators. So again, if you could fill them out, your state rep and/or state senator, separate cards. On one side, your note about why we need more funding, and leave it at the table as you leave the town hall. We have tons of these cards printed up, so you can just let us know. You could let your staff representative know that you need another 50 cards, you need another 100 cards, and we'll get those cards to you. So the process, what we're going to do here at this great town hall is in a few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Randy, and then Randy's going to introduce the senator, and the senator will speak for a few minutes, and then we'll take questions. We'll take questions from the crowd because we want to hear from all of you. And talking about all of you, we have a tremendous cross-section of AFT Michigan here. We have people from higher education, be they graduate assistants, tenured faculty, non-tenured faculty, or middle-level administrators. We have K-12 teachers and K-12 support staff here. We also have a couple of unions as our special guests, 2 unions who we work with very closely. One is the Michigan Nurses Association. And the other is the House Officers Association, which are the interns and residents at the University of Michigan. As all of our members do, they do incredibly, incredibly important work, and we thank them for the work they do every day, as we thank you for the work you do every day, and we thank everybody for being here. It's always dangerous when you introduce one person in a crowd of tremendous leaders. So I'm going to do it. Because there's one person in this room who is really my hero and my hero for a long, long time. And some of you, those of you especially in K-12 education, probably know the name. She was the longtime president of the State Board of Education and just a fierce, fierce fighter for K-12 education. And again, my hero for many, many years. We are just so fortunate that joining with us today is the former president of the State Board of Education, Kathy Strauss.
It's an honor.
Okay, so are you sick and tired of what we've had to deal with in public education? Yes. Are you doubling down to fight for the kind of change we need in funding and education policy? Yes. Would you love to be able to say to Betsy DeVos, we want you to end your tenure now, and we don't want you to come back to the state of Michigan.
What?
You know, Betsy DeVos made a mistake today or yesterday. Oh, she makes a mistake every day. She makes a mistake when she gets up in the morning, and she probably makes a mistake in her sleep. But she made a real mistake in that she came after Randy Weingarten publicly. And, you know, if you ever think you disagree with Randy, and that's fine if you disagree with Randy, keep it to yourself because you never want to challenge Randy Weingarten. I didn't mean keep it to yourself. She wants to hear what you think. But Randy gave it back to DeVos and hit it out of the ballpark. Okay, so with that, with no further ado, the great president of our fantastic union, the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten.
So now you're all saying, what did she do today? So, you know, we have made, first off, it is great to be in Michigan with you. I have not actually been in Michigan with you since the day before the November election when I was in Lansing and Detroit, and we were with, like, the last stop was Haley Stevens, and that was the day that Gretchen won, and Jocelyn won, and Haley won, and the state, think about it, just think about it for a second. Gretchen Whitmer, and that's why, part of why David and I are very much focused on how we're going to get that state aid package there and get it together. But Gretchen Whitmer put in a proposal of $507 million in terms of state aid for education. Yeah. Yes, no, it's, look, we're digging out of how many years? How many years? And part of, when I'm going to introduce her in a second, part of what Senator Harris saw today was a school, and we drove from Detroit to Dearborn, back to Detroit again, and you see the hollowing out of communities. And you see, and I know this from how many times I was in Detroit for a few years, the kind of grit, the kind of blood, sweat, and tears that go into actually just creating a safe and secure and nurturing an environment for kids when the government is giving you nothing. Nothing. And so it's important. Elections matter. You see that elections matter. You saw it matter with Gretchen. Nobody has a magic wand. And that's part of the reason why we have to go to Lansing and fight. And John, who I didn't see before, look, Munson Hospital, how long was it to get to a contract in Munson? This is John Caribbean. He's the head of the Michigan Nurses Association.
About 15 months.
15 months. 15 months where the management, this is Michigan, this is home of the UAW. Yeah. 15 months of fighting you. How much time in terms of the University of Michigan? How much time in terms of Detroit Public Schools? Look at what has happened in our country. So Betsy today basically said, I don't think she knew I was in Michigan. I can't imagine she would be this stupid. I know she's stupid, but I can't imagine she would be this stupid because Kamala Harris has now gone to 1,000 more schools in one day than Betsy DeVos has been to, public schools that is, than Betsy DeVos I think has ever been to in Detroit. Meaning, Betsy DeVos has never been to a public school in Detroit, and this is now the third in one day. And what did she do? Look, we made a big deal about teacher salaries. So has the presidential candidate I'm about to introduce. And so Betsy actually spoke to the writers' press, the education writers' press, for the first time, probably ever, but certainly in the last few years. So, of course, she doesn't know what to say. So the billionaire who owns more yachts than I have fingers on my hand, more summer homes, the billionaire, basically said, well, I think we should have teachers have at least half the salary that Randy Weingarten gets. So I said, bring it on. Let's start working on it today. And by the way, you can actually start by using Kamala Harris's great proposal for increasing teacher salaries. And maybe you should start by offering it today as opposed to cutting salaries. So that's what I said today. But notice, deflect. Now, the point is this. There's a whole bunch of people who are running for President of the United States. You know that, and I know that. And it's a very different time than 4 years ago, even though there were people who wondered why we did what we did 4 years ago. What we've tried to do this year is this. We know that the most important thing is to actually elect someone who shares our values. Remember what I said. Elect someone who shares our values. And I don't buy into this, women are not electable. You know I don't buy into that. And I'm really glad that Senator Harris raised that last night at the NAACP. But the point is this. What Trump has done is he's created a lot of polarization, a lot of division, and a lot of deflection and pitting people against each other. And a lot of our members and people in our families would sit on the sidelines if they don't, as they did last time, because of that kind of polarization and that kind of suppression. And you know what I'm talking about. So part of what our strategy is this year is I can meet with people anytime I want. You know that, I know that. I want you to meet with candidates. I want you to get look at people, get a sense of their body language, get a sense of who they are. Because the most important thing for me is not simply a president who shares our values. It's also ensuring that our members feel empowered and are involved in this process. So that's why we're doing these kind of town halls. That's why we want you, go to AFT Votes, tell us your aspirations, tell us what you want, but also why we're having these kind of town halls with all the different candidates all throughout America. So we had something with Tim Ryan in Albany this weekend. We're doing something with Amy Klobuchar in Yonkers, which also has, I'm not sure that Yonkers has more crumbling schools than Detroit, but that's not a race that I want us to be in. But you know, we're doing something with Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar on Friday in Yonkers. We're doing something with Senator Warren in Philadelphia on student debt in a couple of weeks from now. And you know, because we represent the educators in Lordstown, we did a community forum with Bernie Sanders in Lordstown on Palm Sunday. So this is what we're trying to do, and we're Facebooking it and living it and doing all the things that they do in technology that I couldn't even explain, but half the people in this room could explain it to me. So the person I'm about to introduce, the person who's about to come out, this is, you know, there are exceptional people in life. People whose caring and compassion is as deep as a summer day. And people who are smart as a whip. And who could actually, just by her steely eyes, when she's not talking to kids, where she was just melting, could actually take apart a prospective Supreme Court justice, as she did, or an AG, as she just did this week. She's from California. She's been an attorney general. She's been in various other public positions. She's been a senator that is beloved with all the 40 million people in California. And you know, you wonder why people want to run for the job she's running for. But I saw it today as she was reading to kids in Detroit and in Dearborn, the kind of connection that she made with people, with our members, with the kids, that kind of warmth, to be that smart and that tough and that strong, and then also that compassionate and that warmth. That is who Senator Kamala Harris is. And I present to you Senator Kamala Harris, candidate for President of the United States of America.
I applaud you, and it is so great to be in the House of Labor. I thank you, I thank you, I thank you. Randy, we have spent this day together with David and Terrence. Where are they? There's David. Where's Terrence? There you are at the back, holding it down. I've had such a great time with you guys today. And I cannot thank you enough for your leadership. Randy, you know, I see Randy walk in the halls of the United States Congress. I've seen her in front of the cameras. I've seen her with no cameras in the room. And she is an extraordinary, extraordinary force and tireless force of courage and what we need to do to be stronger as a country. And David and Terrence, I can't thank you enough for everything that you do for leadership here in Michigan. So it is wonderful to be with you. I just have a few short comments. And then the thing I'm really here to do is listen and, of course, answer any questions you have. I will tell you, I fully intend to win this election. But as I was sharing with a number of the leaders earlier, the metric of our success will not only be that, it will be that at the end of this process, we are relevant. And in order to ensure that, it is very important to me that I and our team listen as much, if not more, than we talk. So that's really what I am here to do. And I am here to thank you for holding it down in this state with all the challenges that Randy mentioned, that you have all been living through for so long. The fact that you just have not given up and that you keep on fighting is an inspiration to many people who you may never meet and people who may never know your name, but because of the work you guys do every day, it tells so many of us around the country, we think we got it bad, look at what's going on in Michigan, but yet these leaders keep fighting and fighting and fighting, and so I thank you. So I'm here to talk about education, and I'll tell you, in a speech that I give all over our country, I talk about many things in the context of what I think we need to do, which is to speak truth. I think that anyone who purports to be a leader must speak truth. I think truth is critically important, especially in these times where there are so many Americans and so many of us who rightly are feeling a great sense of distrust in our government and its institutions and leaders. We know that a relationship of trust is a reciprocal relationship. You give and you receive it. And one of the most important ingredients in trust is truth. So on this subject of education, let's speak a little truth, which I know I'm preaching to the choir right here. Truth. We are a society that pretends to care about education. But not so much the education of other people's children. Yeah. We need to speak that truth. We need to speak that truth. I've been traveling our country, meeting with teachers all over, many of whom are working, and again, preaching to the choir, many of whom are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs to figure out how to pay the bills. 94% of the teachers in our public schools are coming out of your own pocket to pay for school supplies. The reality of it all is there are 2 groups of people raising our children. Parents, often with the assistance of grandparents and aunties and uncles, and our teachers. But we are not paying you your value. Teachers in America are paid on average 11% less than similarly college-educated professionals. And it is a shame. And for me, it's personal. You know, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Frances Wilson, God rest her soul, attended my law school graduation. You know, but here's what I say when I share that with folks. Look, so many, especially those who have achieved their dreams or any success, have a similar story of a teacher who along the way convinced us we were special. We weren't particularly special, but you convinced us and we believed you. And that put us on the path to the success we have achieved. So that's how I think about this issue. And so what I am proposing as a policy prescription is what will be the first federal investment in closing the teacher pay gap. Specifically, that on average and here in Michigan will be approximately $13,500 a year and will benefit approximately 85,000 Michigan teachers. And let me just tell you what $13,500 a year means to most people, and to the public needs to hear this. $13,500 a year is a year's worth of mortgage payments in most places in our country. $13,500 a year is a year's worth of grocery bills. $13,500 a year means putting a significant dent in student loan debt, which is one of the greatest barriers to teachers, staying in the profession, and for so many, a disincentive for people to go into the profession when they're looking at the pay, and they're looking at the cost of living, and then you're looking at the debt. So this is what I am proposing. And I will tell you that the way that I think about it is in the context of something else that you all know. I believe that you can judge and should judge a society based on how it treats its children. And one of the greatest expressions of love that a society can make towards its children is to invest in their education and, by extension, their teachers. So that's how I think about the issue. I am here to offer it to you as part of what I intend to do as a first priority when I am elected President of the United States. And of course, there is so much more to talk about. So I'm going to close my comments now so we can,
Okay.
I want to hear from the leaders in this room. So thank you.
So David and I will both be calling on people, but the bottom line is this. I was going to make him say it, but I'm going to be the bad guy, which is...
Fine with me.
which is, let's try to make it a question as opposed to a statement. To me, you can do statements, but make it a question as opposed to a statement, and we'll try to get as many questions as possible. You see the rain, but the senator has to get back to Washington tonight so that we will end at 5:30 sharply. And so I want to get as many questions as I can get in. And so, David, you start in terms of asking people.
Okay, so over here in the green jacket.
Yes, my name is Corinne Lyons, and my name is Corinne Lyons, and I'm an English language arts, debate, and forensics teacher at Frederick Douglass Academy for Young Men. It is the only all-male public academy in Michigan. Recently, I had the honor of introducing Randy at the Freedom to Teach event, where we talked about the deep disinvestment in education.
Yeah.
As a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, right, I'm ready to vote. But my question is, teacher pay is just one portion of professionalism.
Yeah.
So as you approach the White House,
Yeah.
what is your plan to address the other aspects of teacher professionalism? Because we will tell you that we champion every day for our children, but the deep de-investment makes it very difficult to do so.
Right. Thank you, and thank you for your work. So I know about the conversation that the leaders have been having, and Randy was sharing with me. One of the pillars of what we need to do is to focus on the wellness of our children. And because that obviously puts in context the challenge and the responsibility that teachers have in those classrooms. And I do want to say this as an aside. When I speak of teachers, I'm thinking of paraprofessionals. I'm thinking of all of those who are part of our educational ecosystem. I need to make that clear because I am acutely aware that it is that bus driver who notices who's on the bus and who's not and figures out why they're not on that bus 2 days in a row. I am aware that it is the cafeteria worker who is paying attention to what that child is eating and not eating and knowing whether that child actually ate the night before or not. I am aware that it is the custodian in that school who is paying attention to the needs of the children as much as anybody. So I do want to make it clear that I'm thinking of the whole ecosystem. So on the issue of the well-being of our children, for years, going back to when I was in local government, I was focused on the issue of undiagnosed and untreated trauma among our children. Because the thing that we know is, one, poverty is trauma-inducing. Children who go to sleep at night hearing gunfire, that is trauma-inducing. And we are not appropriately addressing the fact of it and what it means in terms of how that child will be able to benefit or not from the education that they're receiving in a classroom. We are not taking into account the physiological impact of that trauma and what that means in terms of that child's ability to be educated in the classroom with all of the the wonder that you create there. And so when I think about the related issues, I think about that as a related issue, which is what we have to do better around having mental health services in communities and in schools, so that we are more appropriately addressing all of the challenges and the needs of our children. And what we can do. There's a physician I worked with for years. Her name is Nadine Burke. I'd ask you to take a look at her book, The Deepest Well. She talks extensively about this, about what we can do better around treating our children in terms of their mental health and emotional needs. There is the issue of how we are funding school districts. Because it is about, the teacher pay initiative for me is about retention and recruitment. It is about paying value. It is about recognizing the value and the dignity of work. But there is also the issue about the fact that when you are coming out of your pocket, 94% of you, to pay for school supplies, it tells us that we are not adequately resourcing schools. And it is bananas. And it's just completely upside down that we currently have a system where the funding of a school district is based on the tax base of that community. Because it should tell anybody, it's just basic math. It should tell anybody. So there you go. So the community that has the lowest tax base is going to receive the fewest resources, and by the way, it's probably the highest need. So we also, the way I think about it, is about what we need to do to reform the way that we are funding school districts. And then finally, I think about it in the context of what we need to do to support the natural desire that you have to engage in peer learning, in spending time focused on what we can do around the community of folks that are involved in educating our children, and looking at it from the perspective of what resources our teachers and all who are our educators and in that system need in terms of professional reinforcement to give you the support that you naturally desire and need. So that's how I think about it.
Thank you. Hand over here.
Thank you so much. Sister Weingart, good to meet you again. We worked
Randy.
with Randy, right.
Thank you.
But, well, that's that colloquial for the church, Sister Weingart.
I totally understand.
We work together with People for the American Way.
Exactly.
All right. Sister, welcome back.
Thank you. I
to our
appreciate
city.
that. Thank you.
How would you compare the community?
Tell us your name.
Frank Raines III, and we work for Wayne County Community College. Our Lucida
Oh,
is
wonderful.
Dr. Curtis L. Ivory.
Okay.
And we're excited to be with you today.
Thank you.
How would you compare community colleges being part of public education versus the secondary education and so forth?
Well, look, I think the community college system is a real jewel in our educational structure that has not received the kind of support and acknowledgement that it deserves. It is, and the role of it is expressed in the term. These are educational institutions that are rooted in the community, that are respected in the community, that know and understand the community, and create an environment for the folks of the community to go there knowing that they will be in an environment that will nurture, that will support, that will encourage them to pursue their passion, their dreams, and to enhance their skills. And so I think, and in particular now, when we are also looking at another reality, which again, everyone here knows. Look, over the next 15 years, by all estimates, up to 40% of the jobs that currently exist will no longer exist, right? And when we think then about the future of work, we have to understand that when we're thinking about our educational system, we are going to need to supply people with education and a greater emphasis on education after high school. Understanding not for everybody is it going to be a 4-year college program. Not for everybody's going to be university, but the skills that are required in terms of the skills beyond what we learn in high school must be nurtured and encouraged, and our community colleges are a very appropriate and right place to think about that as the location for helping to improve the skills of our communities to take on the jobs that must be filled. So I think a lot about our community colleges and through that lens as well. And when we think about it, and I will tell you, it is my intention to really have much more of a priority on developing those skills in collaboration with our educational leaders, thinking about the jobs that must be filled. You know, because we have a whole lot of jobs in our country right now for which we don't have the skilled labor to fill them. And that's, again, how I think about our community colleges and how we're going to be able to meet the need that we have to fill those jobs and give people the work that brings with it dignity and hopefully appropriate wages and benefits.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Name? Sorry.
My name is Kate Napier. I'm a first-year PhD student at the University of Michigan in astronomy, here with my friend Kiana Hunt. I'm interested in how are you going to invest in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, to address the urgency of climate change?
Yes, that's great. That's great. Now, I'm going to call it STEAM. Right? Art. But let me just tell you, not only because that's how we should think about it, and obviously everybody here knows that, but the art piece of it, because let me tell you that when we think about climate change, and we should really be calling it a climate crisis, because it is about an existential threat to who we are as a species, but when we think about it, the art piece is also going to be about smart design, right? So that's how I think about it in the context of this. And so what do we need to do? First of all, let me just say, in terms of my background, and congratulations as a PhD student, my mother was a scientist. She was a breast cancer researcher. She had two goals in her life: to raise her two daughters and breast cancer. And in fact, she would take us to the lab with her after school and on weekends. And little known fact, my first job was cleaning pipettes. I was awful. She fired me. But growing up around that environment, right, where people are motivated by what can be, unburdened by what has been, and to open up young minds to the wonders of it all, which is not only about teaching them something for which they will have and can have great passion, but also teaching them about the fact that they, as an individual, should never be burdened by things as they've been. They can see what can be, right? It encourages them to have that imagination and explore innovation. So I think it's very important. And what do we need to do? We, one, have to have a greater federal investment. We also need to think about it in terms of understanding, I know it from what's going on in my backyard in Silicon Valley. It is not, the workforce there is not reflective of the population of our country. We need much greater diversity there, so I think about it that way as well. In fact, there's a lot of work that I've been doing with HBCUs and other educational institutions that are serving predominantly Hispanic students around what we need to do for pipelines to get folks into the STEM jobs and by extension into educational tracks for STEM. I also think about it in the context of this. I am a proponent of the Green New Deal, okay? And one of the reasons is getting back to that earlier point about it being an existential threat to who we are as human beings. The clock is ticking on this issue. And we have supposed leaders in Washington, D.C. who are spewing science fiction instead of science fact. To our collective peril, there needs to be a great sense of urgency as it relates to this issue. And we need top-level leadership to get it done. And when we have a president of the United States who takes on her responsibility for focusing on this issue, it will naturally create incentives for greater resources to go into the STEAM professions and the education for those professions. So I think about it that way as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. My name is Katie Scott. I'm a member of...
We are trying to see if we can, a question from a nurse, a question from a K-12, a question. You're getting my drift, right?
All right, so my name is Katie Scott. I'm a member of the Michigan Nurses Association, Vice President of the State Union. I also work full-time in the cardiovascular ICU at the University of Michigan. Like teachers, I think we hear like, oh, you're just a nurse or you're just a teacher. And we all know that we have two of the most esteemable professions out there and that we do hard work. It's difficult to get people to come into these professions. I think like nursing, teaching has this, we're facing a shortage of people to go into that profession, particularly about the respect we get, but also about the education that we're having. So there's a shortage out there of nursing education programs. I don't know if there's a shortage out there of education programs for teachers as well. Yes? Yes, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we create those programs for what is a fantastic profession where we get to care for people all day as teachers and nurses, and ultimately, with strong unions, have a solid middle-class life. So
That's
what do we
right.
do to create more education for people wanting to go into those programs?
Yeah. Well, this actually relates also to the community college issue, which is as budgets, first of all, let's not forget that we just experienced not very long ago the Great Recession. We called it that because the term the Great Depression was taken. And what happened in a lot of states is that when they had to then figure out how to cut budgets, the community colleges and some of it really took a hit across the country. And perhaps that needed to happen to stop the bleeding then, but we have to readjust and get back to putting those resources into these, into teaching colleges, into what we're doing in community colleges to resource the teaching and the encouragement and the recruitment of students into that path and that cycle. But I would also say this. When I was Attorney General of California, one of the things that I took on are the for-profit colleges. And I sued Corinthian colleges. And we won. And we put them out of business. Because the other thing is that what is happening is where we have not funded public education for these tracks. These for-profit colleges have emerged, and they're predatory. They're predatory because they put profit ahead of educating the public. And invariably, when you're talking about educating adults and young adults, when we sued Corinthian, guys, we had their marketing materials. We got a hold of their marketing materials, and I'm going to paraphrase, but their marketing materials said things like, well, these certain populations are going to be desperate, right? So if we're talking about a single parent, if we're talking about an immigrant, we're talking about people who, because there were no more spaces in the community colleges because we weren't funding them appropriately, had to go because they knew they needed greater skills, so they'd save up money, borrow money from their family members to pay these for-profit colleges, which would purport to give them an education, but gave them nothing except debt. So the other piece of it is that we also have to look at the relationships between all these things. And I will tell you, I will run the United States Department of Justice that pays attention to the predatory practices of folks who purport to be in the business of education but are actually profiting off of people who are eager to get an education, and they're putting their profits ahead of their education, and there needs to be consequence for that. That's where me being a prosecutor really kicks in.
So we have a question from the streaming. You notice, remember we said we're streaming and Facebooking and all the other things that those in Silicon Valley, and Senator Harris understands far more than I do. So
we have a question from Christine Hatami from Little Neck, New York. And we greatly appreciate your position on the issue, Senator. Christine asks, how will you begin to restore our country to a state of normalcy after 4 years of chaos?
Yeah. There are a number of things. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Okay, so there is the piece that is probably the obvious piece, which is this. The President of the United States of America has a profound amount of power that comes with that microphone and the bully pulpit. And we can no longer afford to have a President of the United States who uses that position with the intent to divide, with the intent to sow hate and division, with the intent to belittle and to beat down, with the intent to have us pointing fingers at one another, with the intent to vilify whole populations. So part of it is about having a President of the United States who, again, understands her responsibility to elevate public discourse, to educate the public, and to set a standard, like everything that you teach our young leaders every day. We just had our book reading today with those wonderful students in Dearborn, and the subject of the book was kindness. Let me tell you how much our president can learn from a fourth grader. So there is that. But then there is some very specific things. Because connected to that is this. I believe part of the reason that that there is all of this thing about, oh, look at all the immigrants are coming, let's build a wall, right? Scapegoating folks, trying to incite fear in the population. It's because they don't have a plan to deal with the real issues that are impacting people every day, for which they have a great sense of concern and anxiety rightly. When you look at the fact that in our country today, almost half of American families are a $400 unexpected expense away from complete upheaval. When you look at the fact that in America today, in 99% of the counties in our country, if you are a minimum wage worker working full-time, you cannot afford market rate for a one-bedroom apartment. When you look at the fact that just last year in America, 12 million people took out a loan of, on average, $400 from the payday lender at an interest rate of often in excess of 300%, you know that part of the challenge that people are experiencing every day in their lives is that they're trying to get through the end of the month with dignity. And we have got to lift up the middle class and working people in our country, which is why I am proposing that we change the tax code as follows. And this will benefit the members of almost everybody who is represented here, I believe. For families that make less than $100,000 a year, I will implement a plan of allowing them to have a tax credit of up to $6,000 a year that they can receive at up to $500 a month, which will be all the difference between these families being able to get through the end of the month or not. And, it's very interesting because then people will just come up and they'll say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, I'll tell you how we're going to pay for it. On day one, we're going to repeal that tax bill that benefited the top 1% and the biggest corporations of our country. That's how we're going to pay for it. But these are some of the issues that, if they are not resolved, will leave people in a state of frustration rightly. We need a President of the United States who's focused on solutions and is focused on lifting people up, not putting them down. Yep. So there you go.
So let me do this. It's 5:20, so I'm going to take 3 more questions. Okay, I'm going to do, sorry, sweetheart. I'm going to do over here, back here, yeah. I know, I have 5:20.
Good afternoon. My name is Valeria Jackson, and I relate to this woman over here. I finished my PhD at U of M years ago, but I'm a world language teacher with Detroit Public Schools now. And I'm kind of come back to the full circle about the concern for the welfare of children. In Michigan, we have a particular problem. We had 363 young people who were sentenced to life in prison as juveniles. And in 2012, when the court struck that down, they were supposed to start resentencing. So far, only 120 have been resentenced. 6 of them have died in the process. We're the #2 state after Pennsylvania with the number of juveniles sentenced to life in prison. So I just want to know what your feelings are about getting rid of, resentencing and in general the whole preschool to prison pipeline.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't know those statistics in Michigan. That's striking. So first of all, in fact, in the United States Senate have been advocating and have been one of the many leaders who have been working on sentencing reform. And we took a good first step. And in fact, it was called the First Step Act, but it was a good first step, but it's not enough. But it's a good step in the direction of sentencing reform. The juvenile justice system in our country is deeply broken and in drastic need of repair. What we have failed to do in the juvenile justice system is understand, one, that age is not a chronological fact, right? And I'm, again, preaching to the choir. There are phases of life. And we have to recognize what's happening in that phase of life. And when it comes to juveniles, they are children so they are not fully formed. We all know, and you can go to any medical school doctor, and we know that that part of the brain that actually develops our sense of judgment starts getting formed at age 18 and ends about 24, 25 for men, right? I say that with love and respect. But we have done, and we have overlooked in the way that juvenile justice policy has been rolling out. We have overlooked all of these facts that are facts about just what that phase of life involves, and we've got to correct course. And it's something I've worked on, I think, a lot about, and I think that what we have to do is really just have a very real, honest conversation in America about the fact that we have had a criminal justice system. And I know, I've seen it from the inside. My parents met when they were active in the civil rights movement as graduate students at the University of California, Berkeley in the 1960s. My sister Maya, and Maya's here somewhere, we grew up, there she is, hi Maya. We grew up, we joked that we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full time marching and shouting about justice. And when I made a decision to become a prosecutor, it was because I felt like let's be also inside where the decisions are being made to reform the system. So I speak from knowledge when I say that America's criminal justice system is deeply flawed, has often been informed with bias, and is in drastic need of reform. And when we talk about the criminal justice system and the reform of the criminal justice system, often the conversation takes place around adults. But we have got to, with equal effort and resources, look at the juvenile justice system, because what we have been doing, and more states have been doing this, is prosecuting children as adults and giving them no opportunity to rehabilitate, giving them no opportunity to develop in a way that they will make different choices as they get older if we give them the resources they need. So it's something I think a lot about, and I would love to follow up with you about what we might do together on that. Okay.
Okay, the two last questions. I know I'm going to get in lots of trouble. Number 1 and number 2. And let's make them short so we can just have all of them and so we can all go out together.
Hi, my name is Catherine Burgess. I'm a birth to age 3 home-based teacher for Detroit Public Schools, and I want to know how you feel about early childhood funding.
I feel very strongly about it. So I'll tell you, I mean, in terms of early childhood education, I will also tell you that the spectrum for me is birth through the end of 3rd grade. That's how I think about it. Again, preaching to the choir, But as we all know, if by the end of third grade a child is not at third grade reading level, they literally drop off, and we can have all kinds of, you know, in terms of what we need to do to put resources into that whole phase of life. Again, back to phases of life. It's a very distinct phase of life that is foundational for the rest of a human being's life. So that's how I think about it broadly. There is the piece that we need to do that is about funding and universal pre-K, which I, of course, support. There is what we need to do as a related issue in terms of having a national priority for affordable child care. And family leave, because, of course, that when we're talking about especially some of our highest need families, that is a very, very real issue, whether they can actually take time off of work to be with that child. So those are some of the ways that I think about it. And it has to be about, again, just recognizing everything you know as a professional, which is those are foundational years. And for our working families, for our families where both parents have to work or it's a single parent, we are not doing enough as a society to support their natural desire to parent their children with the resources they need to actually be able to also put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. So that's the context in which I think about it. Thank you.
Okay, last question for today. Oh, we have a duo.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Deion Shell. I'm a physical therapist with the district. This
Okay.
is Rosalie Wicks. She's an occupational therapist with
Okay.
the district. So based on the fact that many laws are under attack, we just want to know how your administration would secure the safety of students in special ed via the Individuals with Educational Act.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So to reinforce your point, as you know, the federal government has a responsibility to support and resource 40%, and is now at about 17%. Yeah, so part of it is just actually knowing that and paying attention to it and bridging that gap, and that would be the first place to go. Because we have so many skilled professionals who are available or interested in pursuing that profession, but we're not putting the resources into states from the federal government to actually get that work done. So that's really in a nutshell how I think about it. Because I don't need to tell you how to do your job. What you need are the resources to be able to do it. Yeah.
So this is not our last bite at the apple with Senator Harris.
Yes, for
Remember,
sure.
we are. Oh,
Yes.
what did you say? Remember, AFT Votes, the website, has a whole bunch of questions to make sure we know what your aspirations are.
Yeah.
And what you feel, and what you, like, we didn't have a lot of questions about Social Security or retirement security or immigration. I know those are all
We need to talk
questions
about
here, and we need to talk about that. But I want to just say, one of the reasons we're doing Fund Our Future on the state level and the national level is to deal with the issues like on the IDEA, or to actually not have to do the Navient lawsuit. If we had a president of the United States who could sue Corinthian and understand it, they wouldn't have somebody like Betsy DeVos in the Department of Education who says predators welcome. And we wouldn't have to be the ones suing Navient. You'd have the Justice Department suing Navient.
That's
so
right.
you get the drift of how all of this
That's
kind of
right.
works together. But I want to say, on behalf of our colleagues in Michigan and our colleagues all across the nation, thank you so much for spending the day
Randy.
with us,
Thank
for
you.
spending the day in schools, and to all of you,